health event of the Women's Health Innovation Coalition. For those of you that are not familiar with Springboard, Springboard is a 22-year-old not-for-profit focused on propelling women entrepreneurs forward. We've been doing this for quite a while, as you can imagine, the 22 years. And in that time, we've had tremendous success working with women entrepreneurs in life sciences and technology. And the stats really speak for themselves. In those 22 years, we've had more than 855 women come through our programs. We've had 26 IPOs. 90% of our women raise funding. We've had more than 255 significant M&A transactions. So, these are women entrepreneurs that are building great businesses and succeeding. And then 2 years ago, we launched the Women's Health Innovation Coalition. What we realized is many of our women entrepreneurs were building companies focused on women's health. So it made sense for us to take a deeper dive and really figure out ways to amplify the success of women entrepreneurs that are innovating in women's health. So that's the Women's Health Coalition. We look at it from the perspective of bringing greater attention, research, and investment in diseases, conditions, or indications that exclusively or predominantly impact women. And the coalition's framework that you see here includes 7 segments within women's health that are our kind of jumping off points for looking at women's health. And that's autoimmune, oncology, aging and bone health, sexual and gynecological health, reproductive health, heart health, and cognitive and brain health. And we decided this year to focus on the forum series as a way to bring together the community of each segment and highlight the women doing the work in each of these spaces. In the first part of the programs, we'll hear from patient advocacy organizations, and we're looking to really highlight the voice of the patient, which is such a key piece of women's health and often so overlooked. And then we'll highlight the founders and funders in the space, looking at the state of investment in the space and putting a spotlight on the companies innovating with women in mind. And we see this as a way to bridge the gap in women's health investment and really understand the reality for female patients. And we're so glad to have you all with us today. So I'll turn it back over to you, Allie.
Awesome. Thanks, Natalie. And if we could bring on Stephanie Sassman, one of our incredible sponsors, Roche, to give welcome remarks.
Great. Thank you so much. And really excited to be here today with everyone. My name is Stephanie Sassman. I am the portfolio leader for women's health at Roche. And I'm joined here by other colleagues from Roche across our pharmaceutical as well as our diagnostics business. And at Roche, we are really on a mission to transform women's health across diseases. And we know that we truly cannot bring forward personalized healthcare if we continue to act that men are the default humans. We need to take a women-centered approach. And what's really shocking and unacceptable to us at Roche is that women's health outside of oncology accounts for only around 1% of R&D funding for healthcare products and services. And this really makes no sense because women's health is population health, and women account for greater than 90% of the healthcare decisions, as they're acting as the chief medical officers of their families and have a much greater likelihood to engage in digital health tools. But we also know that women tend to put themselves last. And so we're really excited to partner yet again this year with Springboard Enterprises and the companies in the Women's Health Coalition who are really looking at how we can put women first and address some of their needs that are really the most underfunded and underserved. And we truly believe that from discovery all the way through the delivery of care, and that includes the diagnostics as well as the therapeutics and digital health steps in the journey, by keeping women at the center of what we do, we can personalize women's health and bring forward women-centered care. And that has to start by coming from a place of empathy and understanding the current experiences and the challenges that women face as they're going through their healthcare journey. And none of these are more profound than if we think about women's gynecologic and sexual journey. And by coming from this place of empathy, we can have better understanding of the true challenges that these women are facing. And I truly believe that who better to lead the charge on all of this than women entrepreneurs who can truly understand these challenges and the funding and the work that is needed in order to bring these innovations forward. We need to have these important conversations about how we bring these new health innovations forward and ensure that funding is allocated to support research and development of these medicines, diagnostics, and tools, as well as broad access for women. And so at Roche, we are extremely happy to be sponsoring yet again Springboard. We're happy to be a part of this conversation and this open dialogue. And thank you all for being a part of it, and looking forward to a really exciting session today.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. We really appreciate your support here at Springboard and with the Women's Health Innovation Coalition for yet another year. So really appreciate your involvement in all that we do. And now I'd like to welcome on Wendy Lund to give welcome remarks on behalf of Organon. Wendy, you may be muted.
Yes, sorry about that. I thought I was unmuted, but I will.
No worries. Perfect.
Hear me now?
Yes. Awesome.
Okay, great. Thanks, Stephanie, and thank you to Springboard and Ali and everyone for having Organon and me here today to open this conversation. I'm thrilled to be here because the forum brings together three things that I've spent my lifetime doing as an advocate, sometimes an activist, and many times an advisor in the area of women's healthcare. And when we think about those three things that we're focusing on is really activating and engaging with women to talk about and tend to their real healthcare needs, talking about stigma, even when the conversation is uncomfortable, which is why today's conversation is so important, and listening and to champion innovation to meet these many unmet needs, which is why I am so excited today for our guest speakers. Bringing women's voices as patients into these conversations is so vital because for so long, we've never had a voice at all. And that is why I'm so proud to represent Organon as the head of communications. And Organon is the first women's healthcare company of its kind, which was born with a commitment to listen to women and raise their voices in forums just like this. Just last week, our team in Mexico sent me this beautiful microphone. I have them all over my offices, really, doubling down on that whole focus and commitment to listening. When we just launched last June 2021, we created this global symbol of the simple mic, and we used it globally all over the world. And we were flooded with voices from women around the world talking about their unmet needs. And they were simple. The way these voices came through wasn't a lot of paragraphs and essays and words. It was phrases. And women have come out loud and strong on some key conditions that are very relevant to our conversation today. First, countless women have shared with us at Organon their experience and the experience of women about the debilitating pain of endometriosis, pain that's often dismissed or just plain ignored. And they're so frustrated by the lack of treatments available, and it's a predictable outcome since endometriosis receives just $1 of research funding for every $200 invested in research. For myself, having suffered with endometriosis and am told it was in my head, and then it uncovered it 29 years ago in a C-section, I think we can all say with certainty it's time for a change. And I'm really happy to say we are taking this very seriously at Organon with a new acquisition with a company named Forendo in Finland, studying an early stage product for endometriosis and PCOS. Women are ready to also talk about menopause. And I can't tell you how wonderful it's been meeting with some of the entrepreneurs, Springhouse and others, and lots of individual women, high profile, everyday women who are sick of going through this transition alone and in the dark. And we are calling out for more more science and less silence so that we can finally manage our symptoms without having to step out of the workforce or fall into some kind of mental health issue or depression. And then we just saw a few weeks ago the staggering new facts from UNFPA that the unintended pregnancy rate remains as high as it was when I was at Planned Parenthood in the late 90s. If other diseases had rates this high, we can be sure that companies would be running to solve it. So on World Contraception Day last year, we issued a public service announcement, and it ignited a worldwide conversation about the staggering rates of unplanned pregnancy. And the message we heard loud and clear was a call for more education, more information, more empathy, and especially a conversation. And we need the partners to do this. And on fertility, it's been like opening a floodgate. Women and men too, many, I'm proud to say, are in our own company, are bravely challenging cruel taboos about infertility and seeking out support and treatment like never before. This is an especially timely topic for us because today it's International Infertility Awareness Week in the US. And if you visit Organon's social channels, you'll see that we're running a pretty bold campaign to bust through stigma and give voice to aspiring parents of all kinds. So what's the learning here from all this listening? So, we all know that health really begins when we hear her, and we are dealing with conditions and generations of neglect and a tangle of taboos and stigma, and real solutions requiring untangling these patterns and beliefs too. And history shows that innovation alone can't do the job. History also shows that it's not just the lives of women and girls that hang in the balance. When she is healthy, she is empowered, she is resilient, she prospers, and so too does her community, her society, and her economy, with an impact that it goes generation to generation to generation, which is why gatherings like this are so important. All of us on the front lines who are here for our health, as we like to say at Organon, need a community of support to exchange, learn. We're going to advance together. I've seen so much just in my 9 months, 11 months here at Organon, how much I see all of our boats are rising. And I just want to say thank you for having me, and thank you to all the patient groups, the founders, the funders who are here to share their experiences and inspire us with their achievements. And I'm looking forward to, of course, today listening. So for now, I'll be quiet, and I'm looking forward to some great discussion. And I believe I'm turning it over to Alice, but Ali, if I'm wrong, you can take it away.
No, you're exactly right. So that's amazing. Thank you so much, Wendy. We really appreciate you being involved today, and just for sharing all that Organon is doing in this space. So thanks so much, Wendy. And you're right that we're welcoming on Alice Zheng next, who will be our moderator for today's panel discussions.
Great. Thank you so much, Ali and Wendy. It's so nice to be here. I have to say, this is, one of my favorite event series. I love that, there's different women's health issues that are highlighted, and also so many familiar faces. Quick shout out for Wendy. She mentioned Here for Her Health. She has a podcast by that name. So check it out if you have time. There's some great conversations on there. And so wanted to really just, highlight why we're having this conversation today. So Stephanie mentioned earlier that, women's health outside of oncology is about 1% of the R&D pipeline. And indeed, that's something that I had been studying for some time, and it's just really astounding when you look at that. So I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here. Everybody probably knows that women's health has been underserved, whether that's women in general in healthcare or these female-specific diseases. So for today, the focus, as you've seen in the title, is on gynecological and sexual issues that women face. And this has been mentioned, a few of them by Wendy earlier, endometriosis and other things. And I'm also really excited that we're going to have the first panel on patient voices, because that's often missing in these conversations. We often jump straight to the researchers, the founders, the funders, and while there is overlap with the patient experience, it's just so wonderful to specifically capture that. And by way of introduction, I'm currently a principal at RH Capital within Rhia Ventures. We are a women's health focused fund, venture capital and impact fund, and we look at all of these women's health issues. So if you are an entrepreneur in this space, we'd love to connect and hear what you're working on. And Ali, should we go ahead and bring on the other panelists for the first panel? Great. So we have a jam-packed agenda, as you may have seen. We're going to have 2 different panels. The first one, as mentioned, on patient voices, and then we'll turn to the founders and the funders. And just a couple of stats before we dive in. So the patient voice panel, we have a number of leaders within the space who have had personal experiences. And many of you already know that endometriosis affects 10% of reproductive age women. PCOS affects 10, some even say 20% of reproductive age women. And we want to make sure that the voices of patients with these conditions that are so prevalent and yet underserved are indeed being highlighted. So I'm going to first turn to each of the panelists to have them introduce herself and her organization. And what's really unique again about this panel is that each person has a personal journey that has really influenced her work. Let's hear a little bit more about that, how that has woven into the journey and how that's influenced what you're doing today. So I'll go ahead and start with Sasha.
Thanks, Alice, and thanks to Springboard for inviting me. My name is Sasha Ottey. I am founder and executive director of PCOS Challenge, the National Polycystic Ovary Syndrome Association, which I founded shortly after my own diagnosis with PCOS. I was diagnosed by an OBGYN because I missed my period, and I knew that wasn't normal. And she gave me the diagnosis and then told me, come back to see her when I want to get pregnant, which is a very common story. And I felt dismissed and there wasn't much information. So I knew that after doing my own research that there were millions of others like me around the world who needed evidence-based information and support. And so I founded PCOS Challenge with the mission to raise the profile and awareness about polycystic ovary syndrome and to bring evidence-based information to patients and healthcare providers and the general public about PCOS. And then went into advocacy to do just that, and also to raise funding and awareness around for research for PCOS. So thank you so much for having me for this very important discussion today, and look forward to it.
Great, thank you so much, Sasha. Shelby, can you go next?
Yes, thank you so much, Alice. It's great to be here. My name is Shelby Eckard. I'm not only a PCOS patient, but I'm a PCOS patient turned PCOS advocate. I work closely with PCOS Challenge and I'm on their patient advisory board. But just like Sasha, I was diagnosed later in life when I was struggling to get pregnant, like a lot of people with PCOS are diagnosed. But my advocacy journey started out of pure frustration, looking back, the more I learned, the more that I researched on my own, because when I was diagnosed, I was given a pamphlet and said, okay, well, just figure it out. So I think I was actually told to Google it by my doctor. I started a support group and now I advocate as PCOS support girl online on all different social media platforms. But mine was frustration out of the other comorbidities that no one talks about with PCOS, the mental health issues like eating disorders, anxiety, depression, the cholesterol issues, the heart risks, so many things that no one ever thinks is related to PCOS and can be devastating to a woman's health if not diagnosed early. So I spend my time not only advocating, I can't change my late diagnosis, but now I have a daughter and I want better for her. So I advocate for daughters like her and other women that deserve better in the PCOS space.
Thanks so much, Shelby. And Diana, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Diana Falzone. I'm from the Endometriosis Foundation of America. I had also a very late diagnosis. I was going to doctors with painful periods since I was 11 years old and told that was just a woman's journey. And it was chalked up to what anyone who has a period experiences and never looked at more deeply. So when I was 32, I had an acute onset of symptoms and went to the ER and was told, hey, you might have a hormonal imbalance or it's the flu. But I knew something was wrong, and I wasn't that young girl anymore who was 11 years old. I was a 32-year-old grown woman with a grown voice. And I said, I have to find the answer to this. And after finding a specialist, the specialist suspected endometriosis, and also at the same time checked for infertility, even though I was not trying to get pregnant. And I had the diagnosis of what she thought was endometriosis, which only can be diagnosed by a biopsy of the tissue, which I later would get after an excision surgery, and a blood test that showed that I had the fertility levels and egg reserve of a woman who was in menopause. This was earth-shattering to me, and I did not have anyone I knew with that diagnosis, even though there's 1 in 10 in the US alone that have endometriosis, and an estimated 200 million globally have the disease. I knew nothing about it. I knew no one who had it. So I actually turned to EndoFound and their website and learned a lot from it. And it was then about a year later in 2017 where I said, okay, I have armed myself with knowledge, but what am I going to do with it? This only helps me. If there's 1 in 10 and I can help one of them in some way by amplifying the voices and advocating for their needs, then that is what I want to do. And that's when my passion really began. And I began working with EndoFound and with the organization that was co-founded by Dr. Tamara Sechkin, who is one of the premier excision surgeons specifically for endometriosis in the nation, and Padma Lakshmi. They have been working diligently on trying to change not only the advocacy aspect of things, but are trying to change the educational levels, what's going on in the school system, by arming educators with necessary materials about mental health disorders, and also working on the federal level, making sure that we are not forgotten, those with endo are not forgotten, and that the funding does go to the NIH and to the DOD, and that endometriosis is not left behind, so that we can make some serious changes so that those don't have to suffer or have limited options that really don't work long term.
Wow. Thank you thank you everyone for sharing. This is so eye-opening. And, even for those of us working in the space, we know the statistics, it's just so, inspiring and eye-opening to hear the actual journeys. And, we heard some common themes about feeling dismissed. And indeed, there's a lot of writing around women, experiencing gaslighting in the medical system. We heard themes around late diagnosis, lack of information. And Shelby, you even mentioned that there's additional health issues. And indeed, Apple and Harvard just published some research on PCOS and heart health. And those are linkages that really haven't been well understood so far. Thanks again. And with that, would love to hear a little bit more in detail about the type of work that you're doing. So again, a lot of times these types of gatherings are entrepreneurs and funders, but it's really important that we also, see the other parts of the ecosystem and what's happening there. So we'd love to hear from each of the panelists. You mentioned a little bit about the type of advocacy work. Could you describe a little bit more, maybe give an example? And along with that, what is a roadblock that you might be experiencing, and how could this coalition and the audience today help take actions against some of those roadblocks?
So I'll start. So in 2017, after years of trying to advocate around PCOS, raise a profile, and we're wondering what causes the lack of awareness for a condition that is so prevalent, so common. Why is it that we would apply for grants for our organization, but the grantors had never heard of PCOS, knew nothing about PCOS and its connection to diabetes or cardiovascular disease or other chronic conditions. And so what was causing the lack of awareness around PCOS? On some levels, there's a lot of stigma and shame. So historically, PCOS patients would be very silent and quiet. And there's also a huge disparity in the diagnosis around PCOS. 50 to 70% of PCOS patients aren't diagnosed. So not getting diagnosed, when you do get a diagnosis, there there was a lot of shame, its connection to infertility and menstrual health issues. But there was something bigger. And when we searched for the research funding around PCOS and realized that PCOS got less than 0.1% of the NIH budget. And compared to even endometriosis and fibroids, PCOS got a drop in the bucket in terms of funding for PCOS research. So this directly impacts the how the education around PCOS, how we understand PCOS. The majority of PCOS funding comes from NICHD, which based on their mission and charter, their focus is mostly on reproductive health. So we didn't understand, and still to this day we don't understand a lot about PCOS across the lifespan, PCOS and metabolic health, PCOS and mental health. And so we had to do something about this to increase funding for PCOS research. And the way that we did this was turn to Congress. So we did the first briefing in 2017, first congressional briefing on PCOS. We formed a congressional PCOS caucus, a bipartisan caucus on the Hill. And we started a resolution to officially designate September as PCOS Awareness Month. And so since 2017 to this year, we realized that, of course, the awareness is now increasing because now we have a month federally designated to PCOS awareness. And we're also doing this on the state levels as well. But it's more than just an awareness month. It allows advocates, activists, researchers, all of the stakeholders in the space to really highlight the needs for more attention to this disorder and other women's health disorders. So that was a really big win. And PCOS Challenge, we also founded World PCOS Day, which is the 1st of September to kick off the month. And so this stimulated a lot of conversations, empowered a lot of PCOS patients to be more vocal, to use their voice, to advocate, to share with their congresspeople how it's impacting them as constituents and actually being the change that we want to see. So since 2017, PCOS funding has now increased by 19%. So it's still, we still have a ways to go, but that shows the power of advocacy and patients being involved in creating their own change for their own disorder. So we're optimistic that this is the beginning of a journey to improving the future for PCOS patients. So that's one thing that we're really proud of. And Shelby was one of the activists, really, because she's really vocal on social media as PCOS support girl, who made it happen. And it was, the researchers were really they didn't have this camaraderie or this opportunity to participate as well before. So, I think advocacy awareness is really important, but one of the roadblocks is still the lack of understanding of how PCOS impacts a person throughout their entire lifespan, that it's not only a reproductive health issue, that is connected to cardiovascular disease, to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, infertility. I'm wearing teal and orange for Infertility Awareness Week and PCOS. So I think just working together, and I would love to connect with others interested parties after this panel in helping to do more advocacy work around PCOS.
Wow. Thanks so much for sharing, Sasha. That's incredible. Let's all celebrate the wins on the increased research, on the increased awareness. And, it's not surprising that lack of awareness begets, a lack of research. If we think about the areas that get a lot of attention, breast cancer. We love for other conditions to have that level of awareness where there's no stigma or less stigma. You can, people talk about it, all men and women, there are walks and things. And unsurprisingly, it's also one of the best funded areas within women's health. So how do we bring that to other parts that don't have that kind of awareness? And Shelby, would you like to add anything onto that? And then let's hear from Diana.
Yeah, I'm fortunate that I get to work with Sasha and PCOS Challenge. They do amazing work in the research and the advocacy on Capitol Hill and making so much change. What I'll say is the roadblock that I see is, as an advocate that talks to patients with PCOS every single day, it's the same story over and over again. It's the frustration of only getting diagnosed when they're facing infertility or they're gained a certain amount of weight, because PCOS is viewed as a weight or an infertility issue. And then they're sent home to do their own research, much like me. And you see the connections to serious health conditions like depression, anxiety, eating disorders, heart health. And so much is in your control if the doctors give you an early diagnosis and you use your voice. So a roadblock for me is there's so much stigma around PCOS. Patients are afraid to talk about it because we're almost blamed for PCOS. But if the doctors were more educated and more research was available, they'd be better equipped to not only diagnose us earlier, but give us the tools to help set us up for a better, healthy life with PCOS, because it's always caught when it's too late. And then the patient is made to feel like it's their fault. And we should never feel like it's our fault. And so I use my platform to encourage people to fight stigma and to share their story, because sharing your story is going to help others.
Well, that's great to hear. Thanks so much, Shelby. Diana, would you like to share?
Thank you. And I just want to applaud Sasha and Shelby for all their work they're doing, because even though we have different diseases, we all can help each other fight for change. And I just applaud everyone for everything that they're doing. I think there's a commonality of diagnostic delay as being a major roadblock, because that delay causes the diseases to fester, to get worse, to manifest in more ways as we keep talking about reproductive. I know for myself, I had no idea that endometriosis was an extrapelvic disease, which means it could actually cause your lungs to collapse. It could cause kidney failure. I mean, these are very serious, life-altering, life-threatening things that can happen because they are tied to endometriosis. So if we don't have the education and or the research that go hand in hand to diagnose earlier, the disease, as we know, only gets worse. And speaking of research, when we talk about the federal or even the state level, one roadblock consistently is how slow moving this all is. It takes a long time to make an impact on federal policy. Each year, as you all know, there's an appropriations process, and we at the Endo Found try really hard to get our foot in the door and to shout from the rooftops that endometriosis is something worth funding. There are a few different agencies that have allocated funding to endo, the NIH, the DOD. It's also hard to have advocates believe that their voices matter. They think, well, I'm not a legislator, I'm not a celebrity, I'm not a public figure, but they can help, you can help. We have created the Up Endo Coalition at the Endometriosis Foundation, and we are looking to partner with other organizations to support our efforts. We're planning a day of action in mid-May, and this is to give advocates a way to reach out to their members of Congress to share their stories. The UPO Coalition is also working to support the Congressional Endometriosis Caucus, which we did a briefing with earlier this year. It's a collection of members of Congress who are trying to bring more attention for legislation, for funding, for awareness as well. And if you are able to and would like to join us and take action, you can go to endofound.org/upendo. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Diana. It's wonderful to hear about your work as well. And yes, please, send any links or information to the chat. I know this can be, a great forum for other folks to connect with like-minded ones. And thanks again for everyone for the thoughts. We've heard so many common themes about lack of awareness and how we can increase that through sharing stories, through kind of policy actions. We've heard about disparities in late diagnoses and lack of research. And so I'm going to turn to the panelists for one final question. So, given your work and your personal experiences, if you could wave a magic wand, what would be one thing, one solution you would love to see developed, or, one policy change, or just one change in general in the world that could really advance your cause?
One, believe women. I think if we just start believing women and not gaslighting across the board, that would be incredible. So we wouldn't have to wait or feel dismissed. And yeah, there are many common themes. And I think one of the underlying issues why there's this delay in diagnosis and treatment options is because we're not believed. And I recently went to an endometriosis conference, and there was this one thing that resonated with me where the founder said, we were never silent, we just weren't listened to. So a lot of times we're speaking up and we're not listening to, and we're being told it's in our head, or that's just the experience of a woman. So believe women, and I think that would help to unravel a lot of the underlying issues that we all face.
I echo what Sasha feels, believe women. I think we have been kind of told, I know I was told it was all in my head in so many ways, and even was thrown a birth control pack and said, hey, if you can't stop bleeding, take this whole pack and go home and deal with it. And that isn't how we deal with it. We have to be proactive. From a scientific standpoint, endometriosis can only be diagnosed with a biopsy of tissue. And if you're in a doctor's office and a general practitioner who doesn't even want to hear your symptoms or believe you, how in the world are you going to get to a doctor who's actually going to go and collect tissue from you? That is why there is such a delay and so many misdiagnoses. So if there is a way to scientifically improve the way to diagnose endo without having such an invasive approach, we might be able to help people sooner.
I echo what they say, believe women, but also believe in yourself as a patient. So many times a woman will go to the doctor and they'll be pushed the birth control pill and said, oh, this isn't going to be an issue until you want to get pregnant. But like, there are serious comorbidities with PCOS. If you feel something is wrong, believe that your voice matters. I always tell people online, yes, your doctor is an expert and they are an expert in their field, but you're also an expert of your own body. So if you are not being heard and you are not being taken care of and there's real concerns, believe in yourself and advocate for yourself, not only in the doctor's office, but join organizations like Endo Found and PCOS Challenge, and believe in your voice that it does matter. Yes, you're one person, but one person is going to make a huge difference because it's going to give someone else the courage to speak up too.
Wonderful. Thank you all for that. So we'll conclude the panel with believe yourself, believe women, and improve the science. So thanks again to all three panelists for the wonderful discussion. And there's an audience comment about economic case and funding. So that's a great transition and segue. We can turn now to our second panel. We just heard from the patients, and now we're going to turn to the founders and the funders. And for this conversation, we're going to actually focus on a different part of women's health that is also under which is on sexual health and wellness. Let's go ahead and bring the panelists forward here, and let's start with Carli for an introduction. So similar to the previous panel, please introduce yourself and your organization, and would love if you could sprinkle in a little bit about your personal journey and why this matters to you.
Sure, thanks so much. I'm so happy to be here. Just to echo what everyone else has said, it's exciting to come to events like this where everyone shares your passion for women's health. So my name is Carli Sapir. I'm the founding partner of Amboy Street Ventures. Amboy Street Ventures is a venture capital fund focused on women's health and also sexual health for all genders. We think of it as a Venn diagram with a ton of overlap. We look at the seed and Series A stages. I was motivated to start Amboy Street Ventures because I had recurring UTIs for 8 years. I was bouncing around the healthcare system. I actually have friends now who are urologists who say, yeah, if you find solutions, like tell me because I have so many girls in my office with recurring UTIs and I don't know what to do with them. So this is a really big problem that I was actually hearing from other friends, but really not finding information about online and or at the doctor's office. And when I started hearing founders with very similar stories, whether it was PCOS or endometriosis or infertility, whatever it was, and they were trying hard to make solutions widely available, I got really excited, realized there needs to be a fund dedicated to this space, and started Amboy Street.
Great, thank you, Carli. Let's turn to Jane next, who is the other investor on this panel.
Hi, thank you for having me, Alice. I became a lead at Portfolia in part because I actually was really invested in trying to inject more equity into the healthcare system. I'm a practicing OBGYN, and I grew tired of trying to beg the patriarchy to pay attention to women's health and women's reproductive justice issues and just equity in general. And so I actually think a better way, or one way to help solve that problem, is to give female founders opportunities to pursue their dreams and their desires to improve, the healthcare for women. And so doing that with capital instead of moral arguments. So pretty basic there. I'm still a full-time practicing OBGYN. And I love seeing female founders come forward with really exciting solutions in women's health.
Great, thank you. And let's have some introductions from some founders on the panel. So let me turn it over to Lyndsey next.
Good morning, Alice. Thank you so much for having me. So excited to be here. I'm Dr. Lyndsey Harper. I'm also an OBGYN, and I'm the founder and CEO of Rosy, which is a platform that offers evidence-based interventions for women's sexual health. I became really passionate about this area when I was in practice and understood that 43% of my patients were having sexual health problems, but I had not been trained how to help them. So I got tired of telling people I didn't know what to do, sought out some specialization in the area, and then became really passionate about providing those resources at scale for women everywhere. So really thrilled to be here having this conversation, and thanks to Springboard for supporting women's sexual health as well.
Great, thanks. Alex?
I'm on mute and now I'm not. Hi, I'm Alex. I'm the CEO and founder of Dane Products. We make tools for sexual wellness. That's mostly been vibrators. So we like to think of ourselves as closing the pleasure gap. We started all the way back in 2014. So I've been doing it for over 7 years now. I wanted to be a sex therapist. I have my master's in clinical psychology. And for me, I really do believe that sex is supposed, like healthy sex is supposed to feel good. And women are being told this narrative that, pain might be part of it. And I think that this messaging that we give to women around putting other people first and not speaking up for themselves, there's this really powerful intersection of how that impacts sexual health and spills over, I think, into so many other places in women's health. But that's me.
Great, thank you. And lastly, Jackie, if you want to introduce yourself. Jackie's organization is very interesting and plays a different role within the ecosystem.
Thank you, Alice. It's so great to be here with so many founders and funders and collaborators that I have so much admiration for. I lead Center for Intimacy Justice. We're a nonprofit that's working to change the advertising policies and other censorship that is preventing women's health companies from being able to access more markets and more people. I got really passionate about this in 2017. I was a grad student at the time and started researching and learning about all these incredible entrepreneurs who are innovating in women's sexual health and wellness. And I was so inspired because I feel like it takes a lot of bravery to start a company in this space and the culture that we live in. And at first I worked in investing and did some different venture capital, women's health investing work during business school. But the more I started meeting entrepreneurs, every single one of them was facing different barriers, from not being able to access manufacturers or banks because of stigma toward women's sexual health, to most importantly, not being allowed to advertise. So for the past 5 years, I've been obsessed with how can we change ad policies at Facebook, TikTok, Google, and other tech platforms, because if women's health entrepreneurs and businesses can't advertise, it stunts the entire entrepreneurial ecosystem, from fundraising to reaching customers to sharing information and changing the stigma and lack of information about topics we discussed earlier with the prior panel on endometriosis, PCOS, and of course, women's pleasure, as Alex talked about. So we've been working at this, and this year, 2020, has been amazing. 2022 has been an amazing year for this, with getting attention from Senator Patty Murray and Hillary Clinton to tweet about this issue, and getting a lot of press in the New York Times and other outlets to raise attention. And it feels like we're a part of a movement across the globe of women's health leaders, across so many different sectors that are working together. And it's really inspiring to be a part of that collective with so many of you on this panel.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. We've heard some common themes here as well, and also in the audience chat about who is starting companies, who is funding, and it's unsurprising that female founders are more likely to come up with solutions for women's issues, and female VCs are also more likely to fund them just because they understand the issues. And yet we also know that there's a low single-digit % of VC partners who are women. And if you look at PitchBook has some interesting data on who gets funded, and it's like 2% or something like that of funded deals in recent years have been from fully female-founded teams. So it's wonderful to be here with all the female founders and funders and others. So on the topic of funding, what's really interesting on this panel is that we have Carli at Amboy that directly funded Dame. We have Zheng at Portfolia that directly funded Rosy. So I like to turn to each of those pairs. With what we know about the funding landscape, would love to hear for the investor, what resonated with you during the pitch. For the entrepreneur, what challenges and successes have you faced while fundraising? And for both of you, what do you want to share with the broader investment community, as there are many investors who are not women's health focused and aren't already bought into this area. So we'll start with Carli and Alex, and then we'll turn to Zheng and Lyndsey.
Or I guess I can start with what stood out in Alex's pitch. So this was in her seed round. I was already familiar with Dame as a consumer, but when you're looking at really the sexual pleasure landscape, there is a change that's happening right now to take the shame away. I think that sexual health broadly is under innovated because of this stigma and taboo. Like, that's no surprise, right? And I think sexual pleasure is maybe one of the most stigmatized of all those areas. And so I think a shift for the whole sector to come into the mainstream is important for research funding solutions broadly. And I think Dame is really leading the way, as they have now been selling through Nordstrom and Bloomingdale's and Sephora, advertising on the New York subways. All of those things is really, I think beyond it being important for the industry, they found product market fit. Their traction is excellent. Their revenue is excellent. So overall, we were really excited to back Dame.
Wonderful.
Yeah. There's definitely, there have been moments in my pitching journey where I would just want to go in and pitch the business and just not even mention what I do. Our metrics were so strong. And I think just having really strong fundamentals that this business works, we're making money, we're growing. That's what investors say they want to invest in. But sometimes the shame and the disconnect around the product and their understanding of the value of what we bring to the world is challenging. So sometimes I've definitely wanted to do that, but really the best investor stories I have are the ones who completely understand our core mission, which is that women are 4 times more likely than men to say that sex has been not at all pleasurable in the past year. This idea that sex is one of the most powerful, aspects of the human experience. I think it's a part of our most profound relationships. It's literally how we exist as a society. It can be a part of our worst moments in life. that just speaks to how powerful it is in our health, in our well-being. And the shame and taboo that we've put upon it has created such an opportunity to create value and to improve the world. So I think if I can get investors to see that, to understand that there's just this big disconnect between how important it is and how much attention we put towards it, that usually, sometimes that works. It worked on Carli.
Absolutely. Well, it resonates with me as well, having been very active in the vagina monologues in college. And you're absolutely right. How dare women who wish for pleasurable sex? It's, it absolutely is very important.
Yeah.
And with that, let's turn to Jane and Lyndsey.
Well, I want the audience to know first and foremost that Dr. Harper has given one of the best pitches that I've ever seen in my entire time at Portfolia. So she sets the bar incredibly high. I think that it was a very easy win for us to think about investing in Rosy. In part, she'd assembled an incredible team. Her ROI was evident. What I love about what Rosy's doing is they're operating on multiple different types of channels. They don't just have one offering, they have like 5 or 6. It obviously met our investment criteria in terms of the turnaround time for the fund, but it was unanimous, and very quickly, everyone on the team was really excited about what Dr. Harper had created. And, to be honest, and elevating the comments in the previous pair, sexual health and sexual wellness is underdiagnosed, undertreated, and here came a solution, both direct to consumer as well as through partnerships that could really help to solve a problem that needed solving for. So absolutely, hands down, the best presentation I've ever seen.
Thank you so much. I hope this is being recorded, Alice, so I can play this back to myself. Thank you so much. Thank you. That's so kind, Jane. I was equally as excited to have Portfolia on the cap table because of their really important work in this space. When it came to fundraising, for Rosy, it's really, I think we all face challenges. The biggest one that I faced, and I know that endometriosis faces, PCOS faces, is this label, depending upon where you're from, of a niche or a niche, right? Like that's the best way to get me to pull out my hair so quickly, because how is something that affects 43% of half of the world's population considered a niche? I just can't fathom. And so that's really the biggest opportunity to change, in my opinion. And I just tried to reframe pitching, because I pitched, as a founder, you end up pitching many times. And I tried to reframe every single one of them as an opportunity for education, right? If we know that there is this gap of awareness that exists, then maybe each pitch is not about a check or not about an opportunity for funding. Maybe it's about changing the awareness in the space. And maybe that doesn't pay off this funding round, but maybe it pays off next funding round, right? And so we know all of us on this call have a huge mountain to climb, and each pitch might just be one step, further up the mountain in terms of awareness and that opportunity to make the change that we all want to see in the world for women. So it's not ever easy, but there are a lot of opportunities for us.
Thanks. That's so inspiring to hear from all of you. And I know we're running out of time soon, so let me turn it over to Jackie. Jackie, you mentioned some of your work earlier in the introduction. Could you share a little bit more, maybe some high-level insights from the report that you've been working on? And I know there's an initiative upcoming that some of the audience might be interested in participating in as well.
Yeah, thanks, Alice. So Center for Intimacy Justice led an investigation where we interviewed and surveyed 60 companies in women's health, all of which were led by women or non-binary founders. 100% of them had experienced a Meta platform, Facebook or Instagram, rejecting their ads, 100%. And more than that, 50% of these companies doing work in areas like menopause, endometriosis, fertility, contraception, half of them in our industry had Facebook at one point shut down their entire account from being able to advertise and exist. And you can see Lyndsey raising her hand, and Dame has been entirely banned altogether as well. And this is information that we all knew in the industry, but a lot of people in the public didn't yet know. So we wrote this report sharing this information and providing visual examples that were pretty egregious, showing the double standards between ads that were allowed for male products, things like get hard or get your money back, with like graphic, eggplant kinds of ridiculous ads about male pleasure, while, let's run for a jog and be able to talk to your doctor about menopause symptoms. That was all banned because the platforms like Facebook are miscategorizing this information as adult products. They're considering women's sexual health to be too adult in nature. So we released that in the New York Times. My colleague Sophia is sharing the link to that in the chat. And then over 60 media outlets covered it in January and February. Senator Patty Murray with the US Senate Health, Education, and Labor Committee took on this fight to demand answers from Facebook. And then Hillary Clinton tweeted about it, putting more pressure on Facebook. So this has been the first time that I've seen US female politicians at the highest level of American politics taking this on. I think it's been really encouraging. We're now in communication with more than 200 startups, more than that if we include investors, and also nonprofits, sexual health education nonprofits that are affected by this. So Center for Intimacy Justice is creating a new, really formalizing a membership, and some of the people on this panel have been some of the first people to be a part of that membership and the early people, but we're creating a whole systematized approach so that we as a collective all together can create a membership program and a coalition to take on the next steps of this policy engagement, lobbying, and pressure on Facebook. So there's lots of ways to collaborate together and continue to put pressure, because ultimately our goal is to change the policies, not just at Meta, but also at TikTok and Google and LinkedIn and other platforms, so that women's health can access the same channels that any other founders in any other industry can, in support of all of the goals we've talked about.
Great, wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Jackie. It's so important to tackle these issues and to do so with rigor, with an evidence base, and turn that into policy actions. That's really wonderful. And Lyndsey and or Alex, do you have anything to add to your experience there, or also successes? Any wins that you've had overcoming some of these barriers in your business?
I always want to focus on the wins generally, because, we get asked, I think, as women all the time, how tell me how hard it's been, and that's so challenging. But really, when I'm listening to Jackie, chat, I do get fired up about the challenges. I recently launched in Sephora, which I think was a really big step for the category. Woo! And I posted about it on LinkedIn celebrating, and LinkedIn took down that post. And I just, eventually I got it back up, but, I had to fight for my voice as an entrepreneur to celebrate like the wins. And, it sucks. And it's definitely, keeping the category back. And I think ultimately it is hurting the consumer, and kind of continuing the shame. So yes. And also, again, the company has continued to grow. So sometimes whenever I'm feeling really down, I kind of come back to our fundamentals, and we are a growing business. We are making an impact. Read some customer reviews or feedback, changing marriages. So it feels really good to do it overall. And the fight is kind of part of, I think, probably what initially brought me to this category, was feeling, the indignation when it came to women's sexual pleasure and what we were being told was socially acceptable to experience.
Great, thank you. Lyndsey, any final comments?
Yeah, I would just say, as Jane mentioned, whenever we went to market, we tried to do so in a really diversified way, just because we knew about some of these challenges. So we also incorporated a healthcare provider channel, and now have more than 4,000 physicians and therapists recommending Rosy to their patients. So we can always count on that channel as an evergreen channel of really motivated and invested users who are really looking for a solution to solve their problems, in addition to our D2C. So if there's an opportunity for any other founders out there to try to find another way to support your business, I think that's been something that's been successful for us.
Great. Great. Well, thank you everyone from this panel. It was wonderful to hear your perspective. We are out of time. Sadly, we can go on and on about this forever, and I would love to continue with anyone interested. But for now, let me turn it back over to Allie, who has some final words for closing.
Great. Thanks so much, everybody, for both, to Roche and Organon for partnering with us on this year's forum series and on this event in particular. And a huge thank you to all of our speakers, both from the patient advocacy side who are changing women's lives every day, and to our speakers on the founders and funders panel who are working tirelessly to get these innovative solutions to the women that need them. We at Springboard can't thank you enough for all the work that you're doing in this space. I mean, this panel of women is just, you never tire to inspire me every single day with all the work that you're doing, what was discussed today. So just a huge thank you. And our partners at G2G prepared this slide that will help close us out with, my favorite thing, which is always a call to action. So we will circulate this slide with everybody who attended. And this is, of course, to continue the advocacy beyond the conversation that we had today. And of course, just keep pounding that drum and keep getting more women politicians, either in the US or across the globe, like Jackie was talking about, to hear these issues and to keep driving change. So just a huge thank you to everybody who was a part of today's event, and look out for our next event of the forum series, which is focused on bone health and aging, which will be at the end of May. So just a huge thank you from Springboard for everybody who was a part of this conversation and who continues it in their lives every single day. So just a huge thank you. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at alexandra@sp.co. So thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Allie.
Thanks, everybody.